So the pressure is institutional, right? It's systemic. The question becomes not if, but when. When are you going to have your MAiD?
All right, my dear. For those of you who don't know who's sitting in front of me, why don't you do yourself a favor and tell everyone why I think you're so fantastic?
I don't know. I'm just an average Canadian.
Please.
Who went through a pretty arduous journey. And I want to share that with your viewers.
All right. Well, let's talk about your lived experience, and then we're going to get into why it's so absolutely disgusting what this nation is doing to its citizens. Let's start from the beginning. You had cancer.
I am a cancer survivor.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Yeah. And you went into a hospice center?
No, I went...
was it palliative care you went into?
I went into just a supportive care program, basically, right? Because that's how I entered this whole crazy journey was as a cancer patient.
Right.
And I went through my surgeries, my chemotherapy, my radiation, my years of adjuvant medication every day, right? Right. And so that's how I entered the Delta Hospice Society center, which is a supportive care center to help people going through cancer.
Right.
I entered that, and basically I never left. I never left the organization. Thanks be to God, I survived and I recovered to good health. But having, seen what was on the horizon, I couldn't leave.
Right.
And, I have been there now going on 7 years as a member of the board of directors, as the president of the organization, as a advocate for palliative care, as someone who is very, very concerned about cancer patients in this country right now.
Right. Because
cancer patients are the highest recipients of this government euthanasia program. And so, that is why I'm such an advocate for palliative care.
Okay. So for those that are from other countries, and the majority of our listeners are outside of this country, people have heard me say the term MAiD, medical assistance in dying, but really what it is medical euthanasia. And that's where we're at. And I know a lot of people push back on that term, but that is what it is. So let's discuss what has kind of gone on in this country in terms of you and how you really became a big center of the involvement around the abuse of power of the government, the abuse of power within the palliative care sector, and how you were one of the strongholds of the only individuals that were not providing MAiD to those in palliative care.
Yeah. Well, okay, so listen, for many people, I'm just a pain in the ass, right? Because I ask questions, I refuse to back down.
Right.
And, there's a real need for that kind of thing right now in this country. This thing they call MAiD is really a government euthanasia program.
Right.
There's nothing medical about this. This is a political movement. Let's get that straight first, okay? Where they have literally pushed themselves, invaded all of our palliative care places and spaces in this country. Places that would take care of people, that would take care of them, their physical symptoms, emotional, psychological, spiritual needs until their natural end, right? And I always say, listen, if you have this interest in dying, right, and you have this new movement around all of that, then go find your own places. Go put in the work to create your buildings, create your facilities, your organizations. Right? Go ahead. No, that's not what they did.
Right.
Right. They decided they were going to take over ours.
Right.
And so all of the work that we have, that this medical discipline has done over the last 50 years in Canada, they've just taken them over. So all of the infrastructure, right? All of the money, the devotion that has gone into these places, they just walked in and took over.
Excuse me.
So, so automatically you're dealing with some pretty unscrupulous people. Right. And so, we were the pretty much last stronghold in British Columbia that refused to kill our patients. Right. Because palliative care, first and foremost, does nothing to hasten death. It supports those on their journey until their natural end. And, that is very attractive to many people, right? They don't want to be euthanized, particularly if you are a cancer patient, right? You get that diagnosis of cancer and you become a warrior, right? You become a fighter. You're fighting for your life.
Right.
Right? You'll do anything and everything and then you have these people who just want to come along and say, well, we're going to just give you this injection. We're going to put you down like some diseased animal. Yeah, that's nothing but an insult to people who are fighting for their lives. So maybe there's no more treatment that a cancer patient can have. And maybe it's time they don't want any more and they would just like to exit, on their own terms. And sometimes those terms are just having peace, spending that last time with their family, with their loved ones in peace, right? But now, our spaces are basically infected with people coming around trying to pressure us like a bunch of predators, pressure us to take this euthanasia, right? That's nothing but an insult.
So let's talk about the pressure. Forget that it's an insult. Forget that it's a disgusting rhetoric that is coming from a specific group. Let's talk about the pressure is coming from and what that looks like in the hospital settings.
There's virtually no places left that are safe spaces for the dying. I always call for sanctuary. We need sanctuary for those who are dying. We don't have that anymore. The last bastions of a sanctuary for the dying is probably within Catholic healthcare. And they're going after them in every province to eliminate those places, right? Those are the only places left that protect authentic palliative care. So the pressure is institutional, right? It's systemic. The question becomes not if, but when. When are you going to have your MAiD? We have some people who've been very honest with us, our organization, about being approached 5-6 times about MAiD, even when every answer is no. No, thank you. Right? It's like relentless. So, these are the kinds of things that we wanted to avoid, that we always wanted to just have a sanctuary for the dying. And that has become like unacceptable. That's an unacceptable position.
To not want to die by lethal injection?
To have a place that would just allow a person to meet a natural end with the delivery of authentic palliative care, right? So, that's how I got into this fight, right? You want to stay in your lane,
right?
And you want to have MAiD, okay? But don't try to take over every space. That's why it's political, right? The control, the absolute saturation, 100% of their ideology. And anybody else that wants to come up and have a different way is, vilified. They become a monster. And to the point where they're literally euthanized, right? Yeah.
And we've seen that. We've seen that time and time again. And we're seeing it over a few years now. We're 8 years into the legalization process of euthanasia in Canada. And that was Carter versus Canada in 2016. And we are seeing a disproportionate amount of death. And I say the word disproportionate amount of death because when we look at, and I've spoken to Alex, I always say his last name wrong. Is it Schellenberger? Schadenberg. I spoke to him again recently, and him and I are in constant communication now over a lot of the different euthanasia bills and things that are going through the pipe. And we're going to get into the attack on the Catholic hospitals here in a little bit. But we were talking about the disproportionate amount of death versus individuals that would have not necessarily met death due to their illness or due to their ailment. And we are seeing just a disregard for human life in this depopulation conversation that seems to trickle down from organizations like the WHO and the WEF. And I know that's quite conspiratorial for some, but when you have people like Bill Gates sitting on panels discussing death commissions and weighing somebody's life versus death based on the cost associated to keeping them alive, it's really concerning that we are devaluing people. And I said this conversation on a recent podcast called Silvercore, which is also a local one. But we were talking about hunting and we were discussing what happens when a population goes to things like factory farming and how we start to devalue life in general and how we start to see that when you see people either lose a Northern Star, which is a religion, a a spirituality, some form of something greater than themselves. And then you start to devalue human life, and you start to devalue life in general, i.e. factory farming, putting animals in cages and just rolling them through and hitting them with a bolt in the head. I can't help but feel a similarity around how we are dealing with our sick, and not even our dying, but just our sick, right? Because that's the point we need to be really careful with. Not everyone who is being euthanized in this country is dying. And actually, a substantial amount of them are not dying. They are what is called irremediable or unsustainable way of living, suffering. What is the terminology they use is so grandiose, and it's so disgusting. It's like they cannot fathom living any longer with something like fibromyalgia or debt, according to Dying with Dignity, as a term of or a descriptor that should be MAiD should be allowed to be used on. And it's really concerning because when you open the floodgates, and this is kind of what Liz Carr had said to me when we were doing the documentary Better Off Dead, she goes, Kelsi, I really encourage you to look at what happens when we open the law, right? When you have legislation go forward stating that we can legally euthanize people, you don't then get to decide what walks through, i.e. amendments and how expansion can be rolled out. And that's really what got me fighting a little more aggressively, because I was also like, well, no, if you're terminally ill and you're suffering from something that there's no way you're going to come out of, you should 100% not have to take your own life to stop the suffering. And then I started to sit down and really start to pull that apart and question, well, what does that mean then when we tell someone they will never survive? What does that mean when we tell somebody that they're never going to get better? We're aiding in their death by giving them this helpless feeling. And then they swoop in and say, yeah, but here's a way for you to take back control. And they feed this euthanasia program as a way to control your own life, when really that's not what it is it?
No, it isn't. Basically what we've done is we've allowed the state the power to kill its citizens, and we call it human rights. Right? And when you have an organization like the one that I represent, that whole commitment and reason for being is to walk with people through that last phase of their lives, to help to make it as rewarding, as enriched as it possibly could be, right? It gives people time to reconcile, time to be with their loved ones. And, to think about all these great questions, to help with their physical symptoms, right? Pain relief. Palliative care is an amazing discipline in terms of what it can do for people. There's psychological support, spiritual support. But, what we've seen in this country is a coercive makeover of that beautiful, gift to humanity, to make it seem like that's not really good enough anymore. The only thing that's beautiful and good is when you just kill people. Right. So, look, we had an organization, 30-year organization, that fundraised $8 million privately to build a hospice palliative care facility and a supportive care center. Right? The basic of which was to provide palliative care to help people during those last days or years or months, whatever, of life. And the main tenet, of course, is that we did nothing to hasten death. MAiD comes in, and the government tells us that we're going to have to participate. We're going to have to start killing our patients. At which point we said, no, we will not. Every other hospice and palliative care facility was jumping on the bandwagon, right? Because otherwise they lose their funding, right? It's coercion again. When we said we would not, the government yanked our service agreement. So we had a $1.5 million service agreement per year we got to provide the public health care system with 10 palliative care beds. All the supportive programming that we did, we paid for on our own, right? In the other 7,500 square foot building next door. When we refused to kill our patients, the government canceled that service agreement, and then they canceled the lease upon the land that we built those buildings on.
Which you privately funded.
Which we privately funded. We had a 35-year land lease. 25 years left, the government steps in and cancels it and evicts us from our buildings, from the land. So they gave us 30 days to get out.
And you had dying patients in there?
We had dying patients in the hospice, and they gave eviction notices to those patients. They were going to have to get out too. right? Oh yeah, this is what compassion looks like apparently, right? In the MAiD movement.
And brought to you by Mindful Meds. You guys have been seeing me take Mindful Meds for a little while now. Mindful Meds is a premium supplement company dedicated to supplying humans with the tools to improve their mental health, clarity, and performance, all while supporting their growth along the way. Whether it's the Immunity Blend, Lion's Mane, Inspire, or Voyage, all of their products are clean, tested, consistent, and they've become a huge help in my life. I found Mindful Meds over a year ago now, and I've never looked back. Go check out their website, mindfulmeds.io, and use the code BRASS at checkout.
So so the time came and a couple of people had passed away. The balance of those, they carted them off somewhere to some other hospice in the region. I don't know where. And they evicted us. And we had to leave our buildings because we couldn't just pick them up and pack them off somewhere. All because we refused to participate in euthanasia, right? So the government took those buildings over, had them closed for 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, they opened them up. They operate them now. They provide MAiD there.
To this day.
To this day, right? They literally tried to destroy our organization because we were authentically palliative care. That's what happens when you stand in front of the government and say no, right? They do whatever they can to destroy you. And then the death activists, I call them the death squad, decided they'd take over our organization so we could no longer have a voice in the public square about what palliative care really is. So, they went on a campaign to try to take over our organization. And, just to give you an example, we were a small organization. We had about 200 members. By the time this whole thing came to a head, we had 12,000 members.
Wow.
Right? We had people standing up all over this country, standing up in defense of what we were trying to do. So we were able to win control of our organization from the death squad. Though they weren't happy, but they pulled out all stops to try to stop us. They targeted me personally. They egged my house. They banged on my door in the middle of the night for about 6 months. I have 3 security cameras on my property. Finally, the police got involved, and they found them, the people who were terrorizing myself and my family. And then when I asked for the police report, 100% of it was redacted.
How can they redact a police report about you?
Well, apparently all the people that they identified as being the perpetrators, they had to take their names out because that's private.
But it's okay for them to come on your private property and assault you and your buildings.
Of course, right? Because I'm standing on the wrong
side.
side.
And this is the RCMP, right?
This is Delta Police.
This is Delta.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, I'm forever grateful that they stopped them from terrorizing me and my family.
Right.
But I would sure have liked to sue them. I'd love to, go after the people who did that.
Right.
But that was not to be. So, this is just an idea, an example of what they will go to the lengths they will go to silence people. Not to mention the social media attacks. I can't even be on social media.
I was going to ask you about that. You don't have a social media presence, which is interesting to me. For somebody who's you find a way to advocate against this without a social media presence, which is really different in this day and age. So I want to understand how you do that. You can't have one because it's just not safe anymore.
It's not. No.
Right.
They come after that. They come after me. They've gone after everything they could possibly figure out about my private life to ruin my associations, to ruin my career. But, to cancel, right? It's the cancel culture. And that's exactly what they tried to do. So only by going under the radar and being private,
right,
have I been able to survive and to, pursue the mission of the organization, which is to advocate for palliative care. We don't kill people. We take care of people.
And you stand by that statement pretty aggressively.
Absolutely, with my life.
Yes, and you do. You really are. You put your money where your mouth is. And I think that's the difference in why I wanted to have this conversation. There's a lot of people in this space I've learned in Canada that we're all very compartmentalized. I know you know that. And we've talked about this before when we both went to an event in Toronto, the Alliance for Life. And we were having this conversation because there are a bunch of us all across this nation, yet it is so compartmentalized. I feel like that's why they've been able to be hyper successful. There needs to be some form of banding together in a very different way, because the way that we have approached this up until this point is when you have organizations like Dying with Dignity, who are not only heavily funded by the government, but a ton of a ton of paid donors, you have this idea that we can be conquered because we are compartmentalized. And the reason I bring that up, and the reason I think it's an important point, is because if we were to strategize just once, I feel like we could outlast and outwit all of these individuals. And I think the other piece of the pie that I see that is really concerning is the majority of people don't understand what dying with dignity actually does and how they approach situations. And I'm going to give you an example. You know this, but for the listeners who have followed the stories for quite some time now since we started discussing MAiD, was dying with dignity has the right to go into public hospitals and to go into people's rooms and help to convince them that MAiD is an option. There is an individual right now that dying with dignity approached in the past week 3 times after she expressed no every time. And it was only done, though, when her family members were not in the room. And this is a pattern of behavior that we see. The reason I bring this up, and this is a subject I do want to talk about, which is touchy for some, but I think it's very important for others. And Alex kind of exposed this last week, which was they have now brought bills to the floor to try to push all Catholic institutions to be providing MAiD. And they are in hopes of taking this all the way to the Supreme Court. Let's talk about why that's a problem.
Well, first of all, listen, what about the charter, right? What
about it?
Right? Is it worth more than just toilet paper? Mm-hmm. In the charter, it talks about religious freedom, talks about, freedom of conscience, right?
Right.
But, that has clearly been attacked.
Well, we saw that during COVID when we had Catholic institutions and priests being put in prison.
At this moment, those institutions are the last bastions of authentic palliative care. Mm-hmm. If they go, then we lose probably the greatest gift to humanity that Canada has been instrumental in creating. That's serious. Mm-hmm. We have no protection for palliative care. I call for amendments to the Canada Health Act to put palliative care as an essential service.
And it's not currently.
It is not. MAiD is an essential service, apparently. But
looking after the dying is not.
No. We need that. Right?
Yeah.
People like Dr. Balfour Mount, Canadian from McGill University, father of palliative care. This is, palliative care is part of the Canadian identity, something we should be really proud of. Mm-hmm. But it's being destroyed. It's being destroyed by political hacks, by zealots, by national lobby groups whose main reason for being is to increase the instances of MAiD throughout this country. They have empire building going on.
Yeah, they do.
And there's nobody standing to protect palliative care, to protect places where people can go at the end of their lives. And that's one of the things that I've now devoted my life to, is to those kinds of places that we can take care of each other, that apparently have no value anymore in this country. So it's serious.
It is serious. And I know it's a hard topic to discuss for a lot of people. It's depressing. It's heavy. It comes with a weight. Excuse me. It comes with a weight. And most people just want to be able to go about their lives. Taxes are crazy. Housing is out of control. We have enough issues left, right, and center than to be focusing on these things that maybe haven't touched people yet. But this is why I have been speaking so much about this, is because just because it hasn't touched you yet doesn't mean that it's not about to touch you. Now, you don't know this, but last week, one of my very close family members was diagnosed with cancer. And they have been telling her that she's going to die from this. And they've already started the negative self-talk of, you're going to die from this. It's just kind of a matter of when. And I remember having this conversation with her last week, actually. And I said, that's not fact. This is not fact. You are not terminal. And I do know people who have been terminal, who have come out the other side. I begged and pleaded with her. I said, I ask of you of one thing. Going through this process, don't identify with it. Do not accept it. And get on the National Registry for Euthanasia Prevention immediately. And she was with us when we were at the event. She was my aunt. She's taken the document and she's in the process of filling that out so that we can get her on the National Registry that you have so bravely started, which is the do not euthanize us, pretty much, yeah. and the angels. But the reason I bring that up is because I've begged and pleaded with her to only be treated at a Catholic institution. And that has nothing to do with my religious beliefs for the listeners. That is to do with the fact that these are the only only facilities in this country right now that are protecting people from what I consider to be, and is known now, predatory behavior.
Yes.
So talk to me why your faith has become such a big part of this fight for you.
Listen, I mean, the kind of cancer that I had at one point was they could not treat it. Okay. It is with the brilliance of our oncologists, the brilliance of our researchers in this country and around the world, that they found ways to treat the kind of cancer that I had. And it became from one point of not treatable to one of the most easily treatable, right? You know, if we're just killing all these cancer patients, what is the motivation for research? You know, we lose tremendous opportunities to find cures when, you know, you got cancer now, I guess it's time for you to go.
Right.
You know, so, and when you do walk that road of a diagnosis, of all of the impending treatment that's required, like I said earlier, you become a warrior. You learn how to fight. You learn how to never give up, not until your last natural breath would you give up. You, if they have no more treatment, then you wait for a medical breakthrough. You wait for a miracle. And, you know, sometimes you walk in that path and, you know, these questions come up about, you know, why am I here? The meaning of life. A lot of time people do get close to their faith.
Right.
Which is what happened to me, right? I became, you know, very close to my faith, and I become, you know, I say I'm unapologetically Christian, right? And I'm unapologetically Catholic. And so I did a lot of, you know, research into what my ancestors believed, why they believed it, how when I go to the Latin Mass, for example, it's like feeling them, reaching back, you know, in this whole chain of who we are as human beings on this planet. You know, so for me, you know, my faith was a great comfort during those times, right? Because you know, treatment is difficult. It's tiring. You get very depressed. Sometimes you think, I can't go on anymore, right? The last thing you need is some asshole with the injection saying, oh, don't worry about it. You know, I'm here to help you, as they give you your lethal injection, right? It's like, fuck you. Right. Okay? Yep. I'm never giving up. Right. I will never stop fighting for my life. You know, and this is what, you know, these people who think they're helping, and these MAiD assessors, you know, who feel such great satisfaction in killing us, right?
Well, let's talk about that. Since you so easily prompt me into that conversation, we're going to talk about these MAiD assessors. And I think it's important to discuss for several reasons. Because we are humans going through a human experience. And when we are humans going through a human experience, that means we experience all of the emotions that come with being a human. Now, the thing that got me the most is when I started to do a little bit of research on this and realized how uneducated I was. And then I am just now like this vacuum for people and information and data points, because for God knows whatever the reason is, I'm here and this is my position. The thing that I didn't understand was that how could we be giving people the right to end people's lives without looking at what it means to end someone's life and what it means emotionally, the capacity of a human being to feel, but also what does that mean now for that human moving forward? Do they have that, you know, that you used to see it in horror movies? Oh, they have the taste for blood. Do they have the want to kill more and more and more? Well, we have a really good example. We have a couple research papers I've pulled up here. And I got to tell you, they're pretty disgusting to read. I'm not going to lie. When they discuss how somebody feels fantastic after they've ended somebody's life, when they feel the emotional embodied language through one of the documents I've got in front of me right now is illustrating the feelings of expressing through the body. And the participants often spoke with hesitancy and uncertainty and rawness, but the traces of emotions and lower speech and softer tones can be seen. And they included words like loving, a solitary practice, an intimate contact, and heartwarming in doing this satisfying medicine that is rewarding, and it is a gift. It's liberating, unlike anything they've ever experienced. Extraordinary work. And for some, it seemed that they held a deeper societal ethical term, meaning social justice or a crusade in empowering people the right thing in the right circumstance. the reason that's important to address, and the reason why we need to be talking about these things, is because in the world, we are going to naturally we're going to naturally come into contact with people who are not in their right mind. It doesn't matter the profession, right? You know where I'm going with this. I'm referencing the National Post article that I've got in front of me right now. Is it Elaine Weeb is her name? And the thing that gets me about this woman, which is so terrifying, is we know statistically there's psychopaths in the world. And I'm not saying that she is. I'm saying that the behavior in which she is not only showing herself to the world in documentaries like Better Off Dead with Liz Carr, and you can watch that yourself on YouTube, anywhere else. Liz did an incredible job with this documentary and keeping it lighthearted, but also showing the sadistic, and I think that's a great word, and satanic side of a human when they start to take lives. Being a combat veteran, it is not fun being able to say that that is part of my past, but it is something that I'm working avidly to make sure that we understand what it means for others to take humans' lives. Now, this doctor in particular has killed more than 400 people. That is just the euthanasia deaths. She is also, by day, an abortion doctor, right? And she believes that this is the best work she's ever done in her life. And she states this because she is able to help others find peace in her practice. Now, she says she will never give this work up, which that's terrifying. And the question that the National Post put on the front is, this doctor has helped more than 400 patients die. How many assisted deaths are too many? When we look at what it means to take a life, I can sit here and honestly say that it's not something I would ever want to witness again. To hear somebody speak so avidly, so heartwarmingly, so proud to be on West Broadway in Vancouver taking lives by the minute, it makes my stomach turn. I don't know if you just heard that, but my stomach literally just went, like, to talk about this woman is scary. She is killing people at a pace that is frankly hyper concerning. And when she speaks about the number, about 430 as of May 2022, and we're sitting in 2024, which means she's killed got to be at least 600 people now.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a zealot for sure.
Okay.
Right? And the really, I think, scary thing is the amount of power that Dr. Death has. This particular doctor is very much at the epicenter of power in terms of the MAiD progression in this country. Okay. Dr. Weeb is, yes, a prolific MAiD assessor and practitioner. But she sits in sort of the Hall of Fame in Dying with Dignity Canada.
Yeah.
She also sits as a founding member of CAMAP, the Canadian MAiD Assessors, right?
Right.
CAMAP produces the guidelines that go to every doctor and nurse practitioner in Canada about their obligations to provide MAiD. So, this person alone has tremendous power in this country. In terms of, public policy around this thing they're calling MAiD. So, scary person plus tremendous amount of power. And the thing about, these MAiD doctors is that, there's a few of them that have, connections with Dying with Dignity Canada, connections with CAMAP, connections with MAiD House, connections with other not-for-profits around demanding that, every doctor and nurse practitioner in this country follows their guidelines.
So let's talk about that for a little bit, because you said something there that I think is really important to address. You said, the people have the rights to be doing this, but is it not the Hippocratic Oath to be healing and protecting people, to not be doing death as a treatment? Isn't that what a doctor is supposed to be doing?
Of course.
Right.
Honestly, they should allow MAiD to be, done through the military. That's what it really should happen here. I mean, doctors should not be killing their patients. Euthanasia is not medicine.
No, it's not.
Right? It's not health care.
It's death care.
It's eliminating people, particularly when you have a system that's broke, when you have a country and that's bankrupt and trillions of dollars in debt. And what a panacea. I'll just get rid of sick people. that is going to save a lot of money and a lot of pensions, on and on.
And now we're slipping into the more what people would consider as conspiratorial, but this isn't. This is the death statistics are disproportionately high in this country versus other countries that provide euthanasia. And they even have looser regulations, meaning the ages that they will allow in terms of ending their lives. But those countries like the Netherlands use it as a last resort, and Canada is using euthanasia as a treatment.
Right. And it's, it's become incredibly predatory.
Incredibly predatory. And that, yes. I think that's one of the biggest things I notice about when you give your talks. Like, you bring that across very obviously, that it is predatory behavior. And these are the ways that we can prove it. Just statistically, looking at the anomalies across the country per province and the amount of people dying in each province, in which province has the highest MAiD assessors and the MAiD doctors. Does that have anything to do with not just legislation, but does that have anything to do with, I don't know, the more woke provinces being willing to accept the idea of using the term like MAiD versus euthanasia? Because when you hear euthanasia, most people shut down and they go, well, I don't want to do that. But they've sanitized it with the word MAiD. So how do you see people like this? How do you see people like this continuing in the medical profession when the whole world now knows that she's the head executioner of the country?
Yeah, well, we accept her, right? Particularly places in British Columbia, right? Who, by the way, hide their MAiD data. They don't tell us how many MAiD people they euthanized. Right, we have to wait until they give that information to Health Canada, and then Health Canada somehow is releasing. No, I want to know how many people have been MAIDed in the province of British Columbia. I want to know the demographics. I want to know what they had. I want to know, what did you do with their body? I want the head coroner of British Columbia to release their MAiD data. They haven't said anything about MAiD data since 2016. That's unacceptable, because, don't forget, these are public servants.
That's the point that's really important to really grasp onto, is they are public servants working for the public. And it feels like we've kind of forgotten that. And it seems like it's more of a top-down approach where it's not about them working for us. It's about us working for them. And it feels like lambs to a slaughter. In the healthcare world, at least for me. And I know that may seem intense and exaggerated in other eyes, but once you start to see it and how many people it's touching who are perfectly healthy individuals, it scares the hell out of me.
It is. Drink the Kool-Aid. Right? That's where we're at.
Yeah.
We have zealots. It's a political movement. Trying to convince people that it's peaceful and it's beautiful, when quite frankly, we don't know what the hell they're shooting into people's veins and killing them with.
Well, and that was a really important part I wanted to get to too. So, God, you're just teeing it up. It's almost like you're doing this professionally. God, you're good at this. So I was having a conversation with Dr. Christopher Lyon, and he is a brilliant individual who is doing some he's got some great work coming out in the next few weeks here. So it's going to be interesting to see his rebuttals, because he kind of went back and forth in a paper coming out soon. And I'm very excited to see this response. And it was kind of over the similar conversation we were just having, which is how people feel good when they do it, and like the adrenaline rush they get and all of these things. And it was really disgusting. So he's got something coming out. But what he brought to my attention, which was really interesting, and I had Dr. Joel Zivit on the show on, what day are we? Last week. And so his episode's coming out tomorrow. And that's going to be a banger of a people to realize where we're at. But what was really interesting here is, so they actually use different drugs according to what do I got in front of me here? I've got the British Medical Bulletin for Oxford Academic, and it is the efficacy and safety of drugs used for assisted dying. It came out in May 2022, and going through it, it actually gives you a table, and table 1 discusses the prescribed drugs for assisted suicide. Here's what's different. They are different drugs for assisted suicide than they are for euthanasia. Okay. So the reason I want to bring this to people's attention is because it not only lays out every sedative used, it lays out all of the 4 different drugs, but it lays out the dosage amount of them and which ones are used in which one. The reason this is important to address is because in our viral clip with Jordan Peterson, people came at me about the fact that I was discussing sodium thiopental, which, you know, let's be honest with ourselves, there are similar family of drugs that do the same sort of thing. But here's what's really fascinating and what's really, really interesting, and I don't want to misquote it, so let me make sure that I have it right in front of me so that then people will not come at me again. The assisted suicide drug kit that is used, according to them, does not include sodium thiopental as reported, but it does include 1, 2, 3 drugs at a high dose of barbiturates within the same family. But when you go down to the euthanasia drugs, now we're talking about something a little bit different because there's thiopental right there, 1 to 2 grams under the barbiturates used. So when they say that we're not using the same drug that was taken off of the table because it was deemed cruel and unusual in the lethal injection cases, it's somehow showing up though in the euthanasia drug kit in Canada, which people say doesn't exist. And to me, that should say everything. What do you got in front of you?
Yeah. So, you know, first of all, like no pharmaceutical company develops or markets medications to be used to produce death in people. So they're using things, they're repurposing things and trying, you know, kind of figure out, what's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with that? And we know that, for example, you know, one of the things that they use, you should probably have on your list there, is that propofol.
Yes.
What it's called, right?
Yep.
Propofol and
1,000 to 2,000 milligrams in the euthanization.
Oh my goodness. Because they say that just 100 milligrams causes a burning sensation when they're putting it into people. Can you imagine something 10 to 20 times that amount? Yeah. Shooting it into people, burning their lungs. Like
in their veins.
But
they don't know it though, right? Because they're actually paralyzed. So let's talk about that for a second.
Well, they probably know it, but we don't see it.
Right, we don't. And that was the scary part, is when Zivit brought this up to me. He goes, you know, in euthanasia, we use a paralytic. But in lethal injection, we do not use a paralytic. And it's because we do not want...
Lethal injection, we use a paralytic.
Not in the United States, according to him.
Oh, right, in the U.S., yes.
Yeah, so
yes,
in lethal injection,
yes.
So in when I'm speaking of lethal injection, I'm speaking very specifically up of the cases that he was talking about when it came to the case study he looked at with the NPR, and they were not using a paralytic, according to him. But in Canada, if something, and this was the kind of debate was, if it was so painless and so empathetic and so compassionate, why the hell are we needing to use a paralytic?
Right, exactly. Right. So you can't see people squirm.
Right.
So it wouldn't look beautiful and peaceful anymore. Right. Because that's the narrative we've been sold. Just like it was safe and effective. Remember that one?
Oh, I remember that one.
Well, now it's beautiful and peaceful. Right. And, you know, some of the things that they're using, you know, and again, we'll go back to Dr. Death there when she says that she got her own recipe. Didn't she say in that article about she got her own recipe from the Netherlands? Fantastic. What is that?
Recipe? Right. We're baking a cake?
Her own little cocktail, right? Who knows what they're using?
No.
These are guidelines, right? Maybe, you know, certain districts certain areas don't use the same thing. You know, it's kind of within a range.
Well, that's what it states right here. So they do have different like sets of drugs, which when you look at the kits, when you're looking at the kit versus the assisted suicide versus euthanasia, they're different drugs. So tell me why, if we're doing the same thing, we're using a different subset, and it gives a range. So to give you an example, one of the drugs, the barbiturate, it's got a range of 9 to 15 grams. 9 to 15. So how do we know which one? Like when I look at these, I don't understand, if it's so safe and effective and it's so calm and compassionate, why are we using 2 different subset of drugs?
Yeah.
I just feel like that's like a basic world question that should be asked, is if this is what it is and it works, then why are we using 2 sets of drugs? And also, why do we need a backup kit?
Yeah, and what's actually going on inside people's bodies? That's what I want to know.
Well, that's what Dr. Zivit brought up to me. He says, you know, we don't actually understand because we have never had somebody go to the end and come back and say that was excruciating. So by definition, how do we know that it is compassionate, empathetic? We're killing someone. So we cannot, if they don't come back out of it or they don't change their mind, which we can't give them the opportunity because they're paralyzed to come back and say, I mean, as horrifying as that would be to get to a late stage of a death through injection and then decide to come back. But that's not our decision to make, but we make sure that they don't get to make that decision by paralyzing them first. What else you got there?
It's a horror show, that ultimately, right? Mm-hmm. And what we should know, you're encouraging people to go through this procedure without informed consent.
That is the biggest, most important piece of what we're talking about today, informed consent. How is it that we have allowed organizations and nonprofits to not only manipulate the public into believing something, but we've also written children's books about it to explain it to a child, so much so that in Dying with Dignity's own book, that they have a children's book, by the way, if you guys, I'll put it in the link in the bio if you're curious, the children's book actually explains what happens to the lungs, which is wild. Because people messaged me after Jordan Peterson saying that's not what happens to the lungs, but when you go through Dying with Dignity's own children's book, it explains gargling. It explains what happens. So that tells me then they know what is happening to the body, and yet they're not addressing it at all.
No, and they don't have to because they have all the power and the money, right? And so they're just going to desensitize our children. So when they're carting off grandma or they're carting off people who are, who have cancer or who are sick, no one's really going to bat an eye. You're going to have a whole generation that's going to be desensitized to the state killing its citizens.
So what's next? What else do we got on the table? We got organs. We got some other sketchy things. How have you, in particular, handled this? Because this has had to have taken a toll. This is a heavy backpack to carry around every waking minute of every day.
It is. It's been very difficult, for, I would say, 5 years, to be honest with you, right? Extremely difficult. But, once you learn how to fight, as I fought through cancer, you don't forget, that, you're once a warrior, always a warrior, right? So, one of the things that for me I've taken tremendous comfort in my faith. That's probably what has gotten me through to be able to deal with the face of evil that you see every day, that you see your beloved country fall to an ideology that is anti-human, basically, right? But the best thing that we can do is we can make people aware, right? We must talk about this. I know it isn't pretty. It's very uncomfortable, but we must discuss it because then with knowledge comes awareness, comes our ability to say no, no. This whole program should be stopped. Bill C-14 and Bill C-7 should be repealed. There is no doubt in my mind that you can never give. No free citizen should ever give the power to the state to kill its citizens. Right. Full stop. There's horrible, macabre, just horrifying things that are coming from this MAiD, the state euthanasia program. One of those things is organ transplantation, right? We got to talk about that.
Let's talk about it.
We must understand that once people are somehow convinced to go through the euthanasia program, what happens to them. And we see, with people like Dr. James Downer.
Oh, yes, he was quoted in
that.
Right?
And all of his buddies, they're talking about, which seems to me just like a business plan, to be quite frank with you, from medical assistance in dying.
Let me see that for a second.
Right down to how can we harvest the organs? Why the hell would you want to harvest the organs of people that apparently, are sick and have you given them such relief? Excuse me?
Well, when you look at this too, and you and I have talked about this, and I'll put this in the show notes for those who would like to read this themselves, because I know you guys, if there's one thing I'm known for, it's receipts. So this is the guidelines and guidance for policy. It was updated on June 11th, 2019, and it's deceased organ and tissue donation after medical assistance in dying and other conscious and confident donors. Confident is such a funny word to me. But James Downer is listed as one of the main individuals on this paper, and it's been cited several times. But the thing that scares me the most about it is when you actually go through it, they vary the key points right off the bat. They talk about first person consent of organ donation and medical assistance in dying, or withdrawal of life sustaining measures. And what's crazy is when you go to the lovely color coded option, because we need colors, right? Because that's how our brains work. They have a 6-step system where it talks about the end of life, and it's very careful that there is 2 tracks. There is the withdrawal of life-sustaining measures and the MAiD track, which all funnel down into one, which is really interesting because by the time you get to the approach and consent, there's a kickoff after it goes straight down that says, consider notification of coroner consistent, meaning how many? And then you go through to the administration of the hospital, and then the pre-mortem donor interventions, and then the MAiD procedure. Right after the MAiD procedure is the surgical retrieval of organs or tissue. So let's talk about why that's a problem. Because there's several reasons why. So why don't you tell me why you think this is such a big problem?
Listen, there was this awesome book written called The Red Market. Okay, it talks about organ donation and how much money is involved with organ donation. And I want everybody to understand that Canadians are premium choice cut. Okay. Canadian livers, Canadian hearts, Canadian corneas, it gets the most on the red market. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. What they're dabbling in here is something very serious because people all over the world are after Canadian body parts.
Yeah.
Why this organ donation thing should be involved with MAiD at all blows my mind. And people need to be aware of, it's a very, very sinister thing about organ transplantation. We don't need to be euthanized by the state, then sold off.
Right.
People need to be aware that is a distinct possibility here. We need to have more information. When I talk about the BC Coroner's Office releasing their MAiD data, that's one of the things I want to know, right? I have questions, and as a patient, as a taxpayer, as a citizen of this country, we deserve answers. How many of these MAiD patients have you taken organs from? Right? What did they die from? What was their reason for having MAiD? Tell me the demographics of the people that you've mated and then taken their organs. Were they poor? Were they people of color? Were they a part of our Native population? Indigenous people? Who are you doing this to? Right? Were they the disabled? What's going on? I have 1,000 questions and no answers. So, one of the things is I think that we should have we should demand that information be released from the coroner's offices across Canada, right? First of all, this is all just a part of informed consent. Maybe you're not interested in being mated then if you're going to end up on the platter, right? And sent across overseas and put into somebody's, right?
Well, I think the perception of Canadians is really simple. I think the perception is that if you are an organ donor, it's going to somebody in your country. You see the commercials. They've done a really good job of this, right? You see the commercial with the tragic car accident, then you see the phone ring, then you see the young child that's going to get the kidney or the liver or the heart or the lung or the whatever, and you see this. We have this idea of organ transplant as this really beautiful, allowing another person to live on in their life, but I'm wondering, and I am serious about this, and I don't mean this in any conspiratorial fashion. I mean it in the sense of, are those organs staying in the country?
Yeah.
And furthermore, let's take it to another level. Are those organs going to Canadian citizens? The people that pay into the taxpayer dollar system that allow them to go and harvest another human being and give them to you. And if they're not, where are they going? Because it kind of rings that, again, that conspiratorial bell. Well, and this isn't conspiracy, this is fact, about the Uyghurs in China, right? And the organs. You know, when you're in China, you can just schedule an organ transplant. You don't ask where that organ comes from. Well, it's no different than our organs. And furthermore, I could be incorrect on this, but I'm pretty sure to donate organs now, you have to be vaccinated. I know that was one of the conversations for a little bit, and I could be wrong on that, and I'll double check that. But there was that conversation. So, and same with donating blood. There are strict rules around donating blood. There are strict rules around this. And for me personally, and this is my personal opinion, if I ever have to receive blood, it cannot come from somebody who is vaccinated. I refuse to put that in my body. And it's no different than an organ. If somebody has been vaccinated with an experimental vaccine and now I'm getting their organ, I don't want that organ. I'm sorry. And people say, well, would you rather die? Well, maybe, yeah, because that's how much I believe in my beliefs. And so it makes me wonder about this, because if we are targeting the vulnerable, which we know they are, because that's just based on results and the stark increase of death since 2016, if they are targeting the vulnerable, which they are, if they are targeting the individuals who cannot fight for themselves, i.e. the homeless, you've heard of several stories of people applying for MAiD because they can't afford to live in this country anymore. And then they find an excuse to run them through the system as a candidate for MAiD. So how do you think we as Canadians can get access to this information? And if you don't believe that we can, what can we start doing in order to make this come to light?
Right. We can file freedom of information, of course, requests. We can demand a royal commission to investigate MAiD deaths in this country, right? We can demand that our provinces, provincial governments, release the data from the BC Coroner's Office. There's many things we can do because we know nothing.
Right.
We know nothing. We've been told no information except that it's beautiful and it's peaceful and don't you want the choice and all this other propaganda nonsense. We're beyond this propaganda at this point, right? All we want is answers to 1,000 questions that we have.
Yep. There is I'm glad that you said that the way you said that. There is a individual's book I was just reading that resonated, and as you were just kind of discussing, it made me think of that, and I wanted to pull it up because it is reminiscent of the USSR. So I just interviewed Konstantin Kisin this morning, who was born in the USSR, who is a British immigrant, and he's written this amazing book called, I believe it's called, it is, I don't want to misquote it, so let me just pull it down here so I can see it a little bit clearer. He wrote a book, and it was called An Immigrant's Love Letter I think it's called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the Western World. But essentially, the beginning of the book is really similar, where it talks about how in the USSR, nobody, even the wealthiest, were only 4 times more wealthy than the regular person. Inclusion on everything. Everyone had access to socialized medical care. All of these really nasty ways of life. And I said to him today, the similarities between Canada and these things you wrote about in this book actually took me back and took my breath away this morning when I was reading it, because people, I think, in this country don't fully understand what this past government has done, or this current government has done, leading up to where we are now in 2024. The medical systems are broken, and you can see that. And when you kind of brought up the idea of debt, let's talk about that for a little bit. Let's talk about why it is actually financially incentivizing people to die by MAiD versus allowing them to live out their life.
Well, treatment is always expensive. Healthcare is expensive. Now, I do believe there is a huge economic component to encouraging people, to get euthanized. We, particularly the elderly, I also think that the elderly are being targeted in this country. Old people who have paid their entire lives into a medical system that now need it. And they are among, the first to to be euthanized. So we can't deny that there is a huge economic component to MAiD. It would be naive to think that that's not driving a lot of the predatory nature that we're seeing inside of the healthcare system. We advise our supporters to don't go in alone, right? It's the buddy system now inside of the medical healthcare system. You don't go in alone. We provide guardian angels to go with people. We provide the Do Not Euthanize Advance Directive, so they can write down in a legal document, I have no interest in euthanasia, no interest in your MAiD program, don't bother me about it. And we provide the National Registry to people, try to keep track of them. These are all just tools for people to protect themselves, because we can't be naive to think that necessarily there's people out there who have our best interests at heart, right? The game right now is it's very, very scarce resources. Scarce resources. We've got no money. The healthcare system is failing. We have not enough doctors. We can't get, people are on wait lists for months, sometimes years. But if you want MAiD, they'll come right to your house. Okay? No time, no problem. Every single healthcare bed, certainly in British Columbia, must provide death. It's become the king of all medical procedures. That is not how the healthcare system is set up, right? It's about specialization. You go someplace they specialize in that. Where I live in Delta, there's no maternity ward. So for a city with over 100,000 people, you can't have your baby in Delta.
That's insane, by the way.
Right. You have to cart yourself off to another city to have your baby.
Yeah.
However, euthanasia must be provided in every single bed, right? So there's lots of other specialties where you can't get every service in every institution, every facility. No, but you can get euthanasia. You must be provided with euthanasia as much as even going after the Catholic healthcare, right?
Yeah, they're doing that, right? And so I spoke to Alex about that a couple weeks ago now, and they are making a considerable effort to force Catholic institutions, the last strongholds, to be providing MAiD, and they are not having it at all. And I feel like they will fight this. I feel like they don't have a choice, but they have to fight this. Otherwise, there is no safety net any longer. And that's what's really terrifying to me is without a sanctuary, it concerns me going into surgeries. It concerns me. I don't think that a doctor would intentionally kill someone if they, but there are really sinister people. With the advent of things like TikTok and Instagram and all of these, what we've been able to see, and I don't know, you don't have it, so you might not see it, but you have nurses and doctors who are speaking publicly about their beliefs around things like Israel and Palestine, talking about how they won't treat Jews, and just saying this out loud as if their providers, like their bosses, would never see it. And people are being fired left, right, and center. And the reason I say that is because people are people, and they have biases, and they have belief systems, and they have ideology they follow. And it feels as if the world, at least in the Western culture, is being ideologically captured by the woke mob. And the woke mob is this idea that words are violence, that death before healthcare, that we don't want to make anyone struggle, we don't want to make anyone suffer, we don't want to make anyone have to go through anything hard, which, as difficult, and I hope I never have to imagine, but as difficult as going through cancer, it made you who you are. So the idea of saying that we cannot give somebody that opportunity to go through something difficult and come out the other side as a better person in society, that to me is robbing them of the opportunity of growth and life.
Absolutely. For sure. There is no growth without, without sometimes difficult, right? The butterfly doesn't become the butterfly until it fights its way out of the cocoon, right? This is part of the human condition. This is what it is to be human. What there really is robbing us of our humanity and robbing us of potential to find cures for disease, right? Potentials to be creative when it comes to things that are coming down the pike at us that are difficult, right? Their answer, panacea, just kill yourself. We'll help you.
And that bothers me because I've been in the suicide prevention place for so long. The idea of giving somebody access to suicide in an easier way just feels counterintuitive. And, you know, I spoke to Joel about this, and it was that, you know, we used the Bloor Street example bridge, and normally how it worked is, and I'll give a cliff notes of it, essentially was there were the suicide rates were skyrocketing in Toronto, and they said, okay, people are jumping off this bridge left, right, and center. So if we put a barrier in to jumping, then that should show that suicide goes down. And it did. It does. Because when you remove the barriers to somebody taking their own life, the barriers are often pain. Nobody wants to be in pain. They don't know what they're doing. You know, they're terrified. They don't want a loved one to find them and be the burden. And so that will often stop people enough to say, okay, you know what? No, I'm going to go see a doctor. I'm going to work this out. But the thing that concerns me and is really scary is that you can walk into the hospital now and the answer is MAiD. And, you know, and before March 17th, people were saying that nobody with a mental illness was dying by MAiD. But we have a local hospital in the Fraser healthcare system where a young female went in and said that she felt like she was suicidal and she was in danger of herself, and they offered her MAiD. So how can we sit there and say that doctors aren't offering MAiD to the mentally ill when we have plenty of cases proving otherwise?
Yeah, of course.
How do you fight something like this when you're not on social media and when you're not, I mean, you're out there though, but people just aren't seeing you the way I wish they could see you. So how do you continue this fight? How do you keep showing up day after day?
You know, well, because I have a dream, I suppose. You know, once upon a time, we had a country that would take care of the sick and the vulnerable, right? So my dream is, which is more like a fairy tale at this point, is to have sanctuaries across our country that protects people from being killed. Just like we have no-kill animal shelters.
Right.
Right. I would just like to have the rights of a dog.
Right.
I want to have a series of sanctuaries across this country that will take care of people. Maybe call me naive or a dreamer. That, you know, if you're ill, you will get authentic, superlative palliative care, right? How do we do that? Well, I go speak to anybody that I can, right? Maybe one of these days I'll go back on to social media and see if I can get away with it without, being hunted again. But ultimately, it's about sharing a vision, right? And regardless of the fact that in the moment, it seems like it's not even possible, honestly, you know, is to hold on to that, to that ideal that we had not even so long ago in this country, that we would take care of each other, that every Canadian was important. That's where I want it to go again. That's where we need to get back to. And it was just going to be from a grassroots movement that we will get there again. That, you know, we demand that, you know, we have the right as a free citizen to provide those kinds of places for people. So, and of course my faith, you know, I don't know how it will happen, but I have faith that God will allow it to happen. And that's what propels me every day. That maybe we're one day closer to providing sanctuaries for the dying and places that people can go, that they will be safe. And that's what I do every day now, right? Just try to get people tools so that they can protect themselves inside of a predatory system, and try to make arrangements for how some way we may be able to provide facilities again that would do that for them.
Do you think that if this current government gets back in, that's a possibility?
I do not, which is very odd because, you know, all over the world, if we're going to talk about left-right continuum, all over the world, palliative care has always been the mission of the left.
Right, which is wild.
Right?
Anti-war, life,
yes,
freedom.
In the third world, if we want to call it that, or the developing world, it has been, you know, leftist governments that have provided palliative care to their citizens. But yet we have this country where we are apparently, you know, the most enlightened, the most leftist government ever. And their focus is on destroying palliative care.
Right.
Right? Destroying those kinds of places. So, for me, it makes my head kind of swim because it's clearly not left then. We're not talking about left-right anymore.
No.
Right? We're talking about more of a top-down, more of an elitist ideology that's going to take over. It has nothing to do with, providing citizens with what they need, working for the working class or working for vulnerable people. It's got nothing to do with that, what we're being subjected to right now. Mm-hmm. This is like a clearly woke mind virus that we're being subjected to that has got nothing to do with nothing to do with medicine or the medical system. It's just like a political movement that has gone insane.
Mm-hmm. I am optimistic that with Poilievre we would have a chance, but then again, he's a politician and he hasn't touched the abortion issue. He hasn't touched MAiD. He hasn't touched euthanasia. I haven't heard him speak on the road at all. All I hear him say is, and let's be honest, he's the only hope we have with the country. That's where we're at. But he hasn't touched any key issues I believe need scrutiny and discussion. And I would like to hear him tell me exactly what he's going to do and what he plans to do once he gets into office, because it's pretty clear why he doesn't address it. He's going to alienate a large part of the population the second he says he's for or against abortion. It's going to be that quick, and it could be the swing vote. He doesn't touch euthanasia at all. He makes an example of just constantly pointing out Trudeau's flaws, when I would like to see some discussion around taking accountability of some of the damage that he's done to the country and what we expect to see moving forward. That being said, I doubt at this point that I can get American politicians on the show, but getting Canadian politicians is a very different conversation, my dear. So we are attempting to get him on the show to ask him this, because I think if he doesn't want to address it and he just wants to put it back on Trudeau and their government, that's one thing, but that shows me who you are as a leader. I want to see accountability. I want to see a repeal around this. I want to see a discussion around this. But I am fearful that he won't touch it until after the election, just because it could potentially cause enough of a swing vote for Trudeau then to become back into power, which I think if that is the case, well, my family will no longer live in this country anyway, so we will leave. And I think that's the majority of the answer from a lot of Canadians, to be honest with you, is we don't feel safe when it comes to some of the medical professions. And some of the answers we're getting from medical professionals are just, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. We're not going to do that. Or we're not doing a surgery on that anymore. Or we're not doing this anymore. But if I wanted my husband to end my life on my terms, all I would have to do is walk in and give him any of the list of ailments that I fall under. And then my husband could kill me in my own home.
Yeah. Yes.
That's terrifying, to give a regular civilian access to mating a loved one in their home. And what if something goes wrong? What is the trauma around taking someone's life? Like we said at the beginning, what is the trauma around ending someone's suffering? Or what is the trauma of ending someone's suffering only to make them suffer more and not know what to do other than call an ambulance and get put on hold?
Yeah.
So I am concerned at where we're going. I am optimistic because I am incurable optimism, and I have to be, because otherwise there's no point in any of this now, is there?
No, of course. This is my country. I was born here, raised, educated, raised my family here. I likely will never leave this country. It is my country, right? I'm a Canadian through and through. What I would like to see is my other fellow Canadians to understand the situation, what's happening, and to say no, thank you, not interested in that, right? What we want is, for example, we want authentic palliative care. We want sanctuaries for the dying. And we want places that will take care of us because we pay lots of tax.
Yes.
Right? And this is what we deserve.
Right.
So, again, I am happy to remain in this country. I'm happy to fight for my country. I am happy to die here as a Canadian. And I would like to think of it more as nation building because we are like a young nation, right?
We are, yeah.
As far as the rest of the world goes, and we kind of have to learn. It's kind of like growing pains. Yeah. We kind of have to learn, sometimes the hard way, how to develop. Mm-hmm. I have faith that my fellow citizens will learn and that the future will be bright.
I would like to think our citizens would learn, but when we're slowly being eradicated as a society in this country and our cultural heritage is being eroded because we're white and because how dare we exist. When we're teaching our children that we should have shame for who we are and where we come from and how we came to this country, where we should be disgusted with the fact that maybe we have white children or white, and how dare we have the privilege we have. Some of the new educational documents, I say educational very loosely, that have come to the system showing that our teachers are being taught that we should be, if we are white, we should be acknowledging our privilege over others. And that's how we should be approaching teaching our children, how we should be allowing things like soji into our schools, into this mind virus to eradicate what it means to be Canadian. We're changing our national anthem. We are not happy when we say Happy Canada Day anymore. We have to, in front of every speech, we need to acknowledge the land we stole. And like I said to Constantine today, if you have a problem with the land you stole, give it the fuck back. But here's the thing about colonialism. Every piece of land has been stolen. So good luck. So the way Canada is going, I'm optimistic for, but here's the problem, and I said this at the event. We need to be louder. We need to be okay with making people upset, and we need to stop saying sorry for having our rights eroded, and stop saying sorry for them taking advantage of our children and indoctrinating this mind virus that we should be accepting that at a certain age, we just get an IV and we peace out to the next part of whatever it is after this. And I don't accept that. I won't accept that. I don't accept it because I have a young child that at a certain point, if he becomes depressed or he has something hard happen in his life, the first thought should never, ever be, well, I can walk into a hospital and I don't have to deal with this anymore. Because I don't know that any human being knows what it means to face death until death is at the door. And the fact that we are telling children that death is a welcomed option, thanks to people like Simon's Department Store, and trying to normalize taking humans off the face of the earth is never, ever going to be something I sit okay with. And frankly, with how fast, and this is very, very Will Ferrell of me, so just bear with me. It's like with the advances in medical history, like I could live to like 110, 120, no problem. But that's really where we're at though with science, is how dare we tell somebody who's 75, how dare we tell them that they're about to have the worst days of their lives when 10 years ago, had my traumatic brain injury. They weren't treating it in this country, but they sure as hell treated it 2 years ago in Texas like it was nothing. So like, who are we to say that you cannot heal from something that today is incurable from? Mm-hmm. That is, depression is something you cannot overcome. Who are we as people to say that we cannot get better? And the question should be asked, how have we made a society so sick that they would rather die than live? Right? And so that's part of why I've taken up this fight and forced all of you awesome humans into my life. Just like, didn't ask. I was like, you're here now. You're here now. And I need you here because we have to start being louder together.
Yes, we do.
We really do.
We do. Yeah.
How do people help you be louder?
Well, they can contact us at deltahospicesociety.org, 1-800-232-1589. I'm always available to speak to anybody or to go anywhere to talk about this, talk about our experiences, the bullying, the coercion, the fact that we stood and we fought and we won. Mm-hmm. We won because I stand here every single day and talk about it, right? That's a win. So, contact us. We are happy to partner with anybody to get the word out about, what it is we need in this country in terms of, authentic palliative care, authentic health care, how we can take care of each other, how we're not just swallowed up in the vortex there that we're told this is how we're supposed to live now, mm-hmm. right? We were as Canadians probably among the first in this new enlightenment, this new woke enlightenment, if you think about it, we may well be the first to depart it, right? Now that we have walked through the fire, we walk out the other end. And then we recognize all of the stuff that they tried to indoctrinate us with. We've rejected it, right? And we as we build our nation, Canadians become stronger, and we say that's not what we want. Our path, our vision is something very different. And, and honestly, this too will pass. I do believe this too will pass, but we will survive, and we will, be able to talk about all the things that happened to us, all the things that were done to us, the genocide that happened to our country, to our people, and we will become an example to the rest of the world so it doesn't happen to them.
How do people get on your national registry so that they can protect themselves against overzealot doctors and dying with dignity?
Yeah. So on our website, deltahospicesociety.org, you can literally just fill out a form, send it over to us, and we will send you a DNE, a Do Not Euthanize Advance Directive. We just need to know what province you live in, because each province has different legislation. And on that page, you can apply to be on the National Registry. We will send you a customized laminated wallet card that you can carry around with you that says, I want healthcare, not MAiD. So just, contact us, right? We have the tools. We have the tools we've developed to be able to protect you. And, that's what we'll give to you free of charge. We can help to put a guardian angel literally at your loved one's bedside to ensure that they are not bullied and harassed into euthanasia. That's the kind of programming that we do. And it is to protect and advocate for palliative care, ultimately, right? Until such time that we can have a sanctuary. But that is the ultimate goal. That's always been the goal, is sanctuary. We call it hospice sanctuary across this country.
So if we can have a MAiD house in Toronto, we sure as hell be able to have a sanctuary somewhere in this country where people can feel protected and safe and not like they are going to be manipulated and coerced and burdened into ending their life on anything other than just really nasty indoctrination. And I always say, consider the source. If it's an organization that makes a whole lot of money when you die, consider why they're pushing that. Consider what MAiD will look like to your family, because it is often no different than suicide. It is a hole that can never be filled. The damage I've seen it do to my friends whose loved ones who have chosen. And to be honest, if MAiD or euthanasia was such a beautiful thing, why do they have a history of doing it to people without letting any of their family members know?
That's right.
Why do we have to go to the courts to protect our people from these organizations?
That's right. And one of the other things I want to mention to you that we're doing is counseling now, right?
Interesting.
Counseling, because we know that those who have left behind from those who have been mated, the survivors, right? They are among the most traumatized. And so, contact us. We'll get in touch with a counselor for you to be able to walk you through that journey of healing when your person has been taken. So, again, go to our website, give us a call.
Yep.
We've got all these programs now popping back up again because they tried to destroy us, destroy our life's work. But what they've really done now is, create that. They've created a pack of warriors, what they've done, right? That will help to protect people and help to heal people after this MAiD fiasco.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful for your time, and I'll make sure to put everything in the show notes where everyone can get a hold of you and how everyone can contact. And you guys know that if you want to get a hold of her and you can't seem to find it for whatever reason, you can get a hold of me. You can either email us at info@brassandunity, or you can reach out on social media. If that's not your route, you can absolutely shoot us an email, get in contact. We will get you in contact with Angelina, and we will make sure that you guys get everything you needed and provided. Or you can just do what I'm about to do, which just has a big old tattoo on my arm that says, "Do not euthanize." So thank you guys so much for being on this episode of the Kelsi Sheren Perspective with this lovely human, and we will see you all next week.